You are a gunslinger. You're trapped in the cold, unforgiving realm of Limbo, involved in a gritty war against the cartel, a ruthless organization harvesting souls to break free of the shackles of the afterlife.
Stop me like that.
This is Soulslinger, Envoy of Death. Hello everybody, I'm Toad Knight, and I'm here to tell you a little bit about Soulslinger, Envoy of Death. Soulslinger is an upcoming roguelike shooter. It's a very movement-based shooter. It's very quick, very fast, very snappy. You're going to need to be on your toes throughout every encounter. Imagine something like RoboQuest or Hellsinger, but this one's set in Limbo and you're a cowboy. Just based off the time I briefly spent playing the demo, I could tell this game is going to focus a lot more on story than I initially thought. There was 4 full cutscenes in the demo, which is actually really impressive for an indie game of this size. When the game begins, the game introduces your character as Soulslinger. At first, you are in the land of Limbo, where the memories of the dead roam. You see your character slaughtering the enemies of the dead, gunning them down as they approach him. But you also see a glimpse of his past, how he got here. Now, in the cutscene, it says his memory is still foggy of the time he was alive. But we do see little scenes of him walking down the road, hugging a woman named Nia. And then we see a car crash. We see our character Soulslinger yelling out the name Nia. And then we see Nia lying on the ground. And it looks like she is dead. After that, our character passes out also on the ground, which we have to assume this is how he died. This is how he got into Limbo. And from that first cutscene, it seems to be that our objective of the game is going to be to find Nia. After the first tutorial run in the demo, you're presented with the hub world, Haven. And in Haven, we find a few interesting characters. The first interesting character we meet is Death himself. In this game, Death is actually on our side. Death needs us to go out into the Limbo and fight the cartel, thus purifying the cartel's souls, and we need to take those souls, bring them back to Death so he can take them and release them onto the other side, out of Limbo into either heaven or hell. Another character we find in Haven is Lady Valerie. She is a grizzled badass, looks like a Limbo hunter, you could say. Looks like she's been here for a while. She gives us a few tips when we meet her, and we don't unlock a whole lot of her backstory yet, but what we can tell from her character is it looks like she's been here a long time, and she's been working for Death for quite a while, it seems, doing the same thing we're doing. Key features to any roguelite is the upgrade system, and at Haven there's 2 different upgrade systems that we know so far in the game. The Well of Tears, which is more of your passive abilities upgraded, and also the Workshop, where you can upgrade your guns and get new weapons and all that good stuff. Now, on your first visit to Haven, you'll get another cutscene with Death, as he's releasing a soul into the gate to pass on to the other side. And what Death says is very important to your character, and why your character is here in Limbo in the first place. Death says that a soul needs to be whole for it to pass through to the other side. If a soul is traumatized or broken in any way, the gate will be barred to them forever. And as he says that, your main character says he knows, and he looks at his hand, and his hand is on fire and red, and it really gives some mystery as to what happened to our character. Why is he broken? Is it because of Nia's death? What happened to make him stuck in Limbo, unable to pass on to the other side? Now, since this is the demo, that's about all we get for the story of the overarching game, why we're here, why we're fighting things in Limbo. But there's one more character I wanted to point out. His name is Deadeye. Deadeye McGee. Corky Deadeye McGee, to be more specific. He is the shopkeep. You're going to see him a lot during your runs. Every time you go into a shopkeep portal, you're going to see him. You're going to buy upgrades and goods from him, and you're going to probably end up seeing him a lot. But I want to point out something very interesting he says in this dialogue, because this is a very fun character. I paid attention to his dialogue a lot. I like funny characters in serious games like this. I feel like they did a great job with Deadeye. He has great dialogue. The voice acting is great. Everything's great with him. But when you talk to him, he mentions that this isn't the only place in Limbo. The Limbo has seas, and the Limbo has other places. And this, I think, hints at more areas in the game going to be added on into the full game, which is exciting because staring at these rocks too long, it gets very boring very quickly. So I'm excited to see if they put a sea level in there, maybe islands, maybe anything like that to mix up to the terrain and really open up the world and give us something a little more dynamic with each run you have. Take a deeper look at the gameplay of the game. Now, this game has your bread and butter roguelike elements. You go through each run, you get different upgrades, you get gold to buy stuff in the run, and you get meta progression currency for later outside the run in Haven. But if we take a closer look at the upgrades, a lot of the upgrades in this game are going to be elemental based, which is pretty cool. I like elemental based upgrades because it means that some enemies will be weak to different elements and some enemies will be resistant to different elements. It adds a new dynamic to the game, kind of like a Pokemon dynamic. I loved Pokemon as a kid, so I love seeing that later on implied in the games I play. And you can definitely tell with the enemies that some enemies will be fire enemies, some enemies are electricity enemies, and some enemies will be poison enemies. And in the game, you're offered the same elemental upgrades. You're offered poison upgrades, fire upgrades, and electric upgrades. Now, the upgrades I was offered in the game were pretty basic. Now, this is just an early demo, and it looks like they just wanted to release the most basic upgrades you can get in the game for the demo. And the abilities were things like turn your next clip into all poison ammo, or turn your next clip into fire ammo, or give your shots a 33% chance to give an enemy burn. From what I can tell already, it looks like they're going to have 3 main variations to their abilities. 1, to change your ammo type. 2, to change your dash type into something like poison dash or a fire dash, and 3, a special ability. For example, the poison ability, which is at your number 2 slot, was to release a giant burst of poison whenever you hit the number 2. From what I can tell with my short playtime of the demo, those are going to be the 3 main elements of your abilities you're going to unlock in the game. And I think the rest will be mostly based around passive upgrades, like getting your abilities to proc more, getting more damage. Some of the passive abilities I got were every time I killed an enemy, would get 33% stronger. From what I can tell, and maybe this is just because it was a demo, but it looks like they're keeping all the abilities very simple and relying mostly on the gunplay and speed of the game to carry you through each run. Now let's talk about the best part of every roguelite, or every roguelike, or any Metroidvania. It is the boss fights. The boss fights are going to be the most important part about these games because it's going to be a thing you remember from each playthrough. Basically, the way roguelikes go is you need to get super strong in order to beat the boss and then advance to the next stage. The boss is very important because there's always a boss you're going to get stuck on roguelikes, and there's always a boss that's super hard, there's always a boss that's harder than the others, and there'll always be that point where you need to grind up in order to become stronger to beat the next boss. And I want to mention these boss fights because I think there is a little issue here, and it's that the boss fights are a little too easy. And you saw in that boss fight in the background that I was just breezing through that boss fight. I had poison ability, and I had a 33% chance for my abilities to burn, and my bullets did way too much damage to the bosses, and I was able to easily destroy those bosses with barely taking any damage. And this was only my second run, mind you. So I do think the boss fights need a little work. They need to be a little bit harder, because I need to be broken by a boss fight. In every roguelike, you need a reason to grind. That's why it's a roguelite. Your first run should go terribly wrong, but I ended up actually breezing through most of the game. Through this whole demo, I didn't even die. Now, this still is a demo, so I'm sure they're still working stuff out, but I do think the enemies need to be harder, and I do think the boss fights need to be harder, because every roguelite has to have a boss that you're going to remember until you go to the next roguelike. Like in Hades, I still remember when I first fought that bull and that stupid guy in the chariot, and I was stuck on those two forever. They're the third boss in the game. I remember very well. I remember all their mechanics. I remember everything about them, and that's because they were a hard boss fight, and I got stuck on them, and that's what makes it memorable, and I think that's what this game needs going forward, and that's what I would recommend them to work on post this demo released and pre-early access release. There are still a lot of things with the mechanics that they need to work on. The general AI needs to get better, but their groundwork is there. The gunplay is solid. The movement feels great. The art is amazing. It looks like UE5 nanite system really coming into work there. The game feels smooth, even though the graphics were top-notch. My computer handled it just fine. I think this game has a lot of potential. I enjoyed the demo a lot. I think If they just fix up the AI a little bit, make the enemies a little bit harder, and get some new zones in there, this game is really shaping up to be something special. Thanks for watching, guys. This is Toad Knight, and this was a first look at Soul Slinger Envoy of Death.